I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook, baby.
Right, man, the Latinx community.
It never gets old. It's always funny. It's always funny.
Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Reckless Muse cast. We've got our old buddy back, Judson. Thanks for coming back, man. How you doing?
Doing good.
Nice. So you are an extremely talented artist, and so it seems like you've got a lot of projects in the works lately. So what have you been working on lately?
Sort of art and life at the same time. First of all, it's good to be back. I've kind of missed you guys. I mean, I was here like a year ago.
Yeah.
It's been 11 months.
Yeah, I mean, that time really flew by. I guess certain mile markers make you go, holy shit. But I will say before we even get into that, I have been busy, but I'm, I can't take my pants off just yet. I listened to the podcast that you guys just did. That was sort of the Tarantino book.
Oh yeah.
And I listened to that, some of it yesterday and some of it today. And I thought that was such an interesting conversation. It was like I was listening to it and I was like, I wish I was almost a part of that podcast. I wish we were talking about some of those things because there were so many things that I kind of wanted to jump in and some of you guys said those things anyway, so I'm not trying to,
we can talk about it.
Yeah. If there's anything that
I even think we said at the end of that episode we should return to this topic because I think it's one of our favorites. So
yeah, well, it just goes to show that I think when you start talking about Tarantino, you can kind of end up talking about anything.
Yeah.
What the hell? You can kind of end up talking about anything because there's so many pop cultural references. He's sort of a bag of pop culture himself. And so I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I mean, I love some of the movies that you guys mentioned too. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh yeah.
And you guys talked a little bit about Chinatown too. Big Jack Nicholson movies. It made me laugh because you guys were talking about Deliverance, and I was listening to it, and you were thinking, just assuming it was like West Virginia.
Yeah.
I'd always known it was from Georgia because they, Atlanta in the beginning. So that film was filmed up in Rabun Gap. That's the part of North Georgia where it was, and I spent time up there. I did an artist residency there, and it's the Hambidge Center, and you go there and you live in a cabin by yourself. I look like I've been living in a cabin by myself, but you go up there and you live and there's about 10, 12 cabins, and then and whatever. But you go down and you eat dinner every night together. And there was a guy there who was not a part of the residency, but he lived in Rabun Gap.
No.
And he had this T-shirt on, and the T-shirt said, Ben, I hope you'll like this, but it said, "Paddle faster. I think I hear banjo music."
Yeah, I've actually seen that shirt. Yeah, paddle faster. I think I hear banjos.
And so I mentioned that shirt to him, and he said, "Well, I'm from here. I live here. Yeah. I can wear that shirt."
Oh wait, we just
your image. I think we can hear you. It looks
Judson,
like
we lost your video.
Video there.
Well, why?
Huh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
I don't know what to do about it.
Huh.
You guys know
I I mean, consider we can hear you. Okay, I'm cool with just going like this. Like
I'm cool, fine. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
But anyway,
Right.
it was a great podcast that you guys did. I thought it was really interesting, and so I don't know, it was really engaging. I liked it. I like when you guys talk about films. Two film buffs here, so it sounded it was good. It was good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. You know, it's cool revisiting an era of cinema that, you know, kind of celebrated more kind of rugged, kind of, you know, taking, you know, like risk-taking filmmakers at the time, because there was like this explosion of freedom at the time. So I was like, you know, that must have been like a really cool time to be alive as a young, you know, aspiring filmmaker.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of filmmakers then too. I mean, 60s and 70s, that was kind of like you're saying, a no holds barred thing, where it felt like maybe if you had a type of voice, maybe you could get a word in edgewise. And I don't know. I mean, there were still big studios, and Hollywood was still a big, as it was years before, you know, a big industry. But yeah, you're right. There seemed to be something magical and maybe unrealistic, but freeing in the sense where now, like, you know, I mean, it just seems like we are in a remake of a remake of a remake. It's all very kind of, you know, I don't know. I mean, I sometimes I see a movie poster or a commercial or something about a new Spider-Man, and I'm like, how many have they made?
Yeah.
I mean, really, I mean, I don't know, but everything Marvel Comics has really taken a big bite out of I don't know, the industry, the ticket sales, whatever, however they measure these things by, but it's definitely changed from the generation you guys were referring to.
Yeah. But, you know, as dark as an era can be, like the one that we're in right now, that's bland and polished. I also think it's a good time for you know, artists to like really step. Oh, hey, there you are.
Oh, you're back.
that was perfect timing.
Wait, did you do that on purpose?
No, I couldn't do that.
That's really impressive. It's like right when you lit the cigarette.
Yeah, just keep smoking throughout this podcast, and we'll be able to see you. But you know, I as bleak and bland as the era is right now in terms of cinema and also just kind of the arts in general. You know, I've talked a lot about, you know, living in LA and just seeing like the you know, art galleries and just seeing how overly political, you know, like activist and artist are basically the same thing now. I also think, you know, it's a great time for artists, you know, who really want to take risks and push boundaries. Like, this is like, there are so many rules and guidelines and fads. Yeah, there's a lot of rules to break now. Like, there's a lot of push. There are a lot of things to like fight back against.
A lot of ways to be a rebel, that's for sure. And so, you know, I remember in my life when that rule was true. You know, when I was younger, and so it can work personally. It can work for culture at large. So I think you're right. I mean, it does seem like such a desperate time, but those are where things flare up and individual voices can sort of push through those things. So, I mean, yeah, we shouldn't get too dark or down on anything, because you never know where that's going to come from, really.
Right. And also, I mean, just when you look at like the history of the arts, it's like so many of the greatest movements came about from reacting to, you know, like the overly restrictive era that preceded it. You know, it's like when the classical era became too, you know, like it's very ornamental and very clean and very balanced. Then the romantic era was like, no, like, you know, we shouldn't be making music to you know, appease the aristocracy. We should be making music that expresses our true humanity. It should be individual. And so then you have like the romantic era that was deeply personal and exploring a wide range of emotions that weren't really explored before in the classical era. And you know, also like in the 70s cinema, it's like that was reacting against like the you know, so you can kind of hint at sexuality and hint at violence, whereas the 70s was like, nah, let's just fight, let's show the rape scene, let's show the sex scene, let's show that person getting shot and killed.
Yeah, so. And you guys were talking about a little bit about that when I think, Ben, you said, you know, you didn't see the rape scene in deliverance, you sort of bared witness to it.
Well, that's what. Yeah, I don't want to take credit for that. That's what Tarantino said.
Right.
In
Okay,
the book.
yeah,
I was quoting him, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
Right. I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think I remember that part now. But it's true. I mean, sometimes telling a story, it's like you're not condoning it.
Right.
You know, you're not saying it's good.
Right.
It's like you have to tell it for people to see it and to say, this is why it isn't good.
Right.
And so that's why it gets very strange with the type of, it's not necessarily technically censorship. It doesn't necessarily come from the state.
Right.
But there is a cultural type of, I don't know, maybe a squeamishness to things that are just a part of life, and they're not necessarily pretty or good.
Right.
But to think that people aren't going to talk about them or express them is a little much.
Right. It reminds you a little bit of a quote from Stephen King where he said that horror stories are rehearsals for our own deaths. And I like that because it was forget just the horror genre, like any story that deals with, a very dark subject. It's like, I'd rather experience that on a screen or in a book or in a painting rather than deal with it in my own life. So it's almost like, okay, like that was a very harrowing movie about drug addiction, but it got me thinking about what it's like for others to go through that. So it's like, okay, now I have some kind of resilience to that. Now I have like a better understanding of what it's like for people who suffer through that. So, I don't like the idea that society will be better off by shunning the masses away from taboo ideas.
Yeah, no, obviously not, especially not for the artist, because that taboo nature is so much a part of the inspiration.
Yes. Yeah.
If it wasn't taboo, you might not necessarily feel you need to talk about it at all.
Right.
So it sort of messes with the origin story of the narrative in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you don't go there, then there's a quote. I don't remember who it was, but no tears in the reader, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. And that could be, I think that's probably the same for laughter or fear or any of the other emotions that you want to go through from a roller coaster type perspective in a story.
Right.
If they're not afraid to tell you, then you're not going to be afraid to hear it.
No.
And what fun is that?
No.
Man, you know what that's like. Come on.
Yeah, of course. It was Camus, who Joe has quoted on this podcast before, said, live to the point of tears. And I don't think that just means like crying all the time because you're sad, but it's, joyful tears, emotional, just like overcome with emotion. And I mean, he's one of the best. He's one of my favorites. Judson, I wanted to ask you, well, on this topic, I guess, I know you lived in New York City. Did you ever go to the Cloisters?
The Cloisters?
Yeah, it's up in Inwood, so it's like literally the northernmost part of Manhattan. And there it's basically, I had thought it was like originally a monastery up on a hill that had turned into a museum, but it turns out it was actually created to be a museum, and everything was kind of imported from Spain and France and Italy and basically the old world and it's part of the Met. And what I really liked about it and what was surprising to me about it is that it's all medieval art, which really gets overlooked a lot for like Renaissance art and modern art. And you're gone again, but that's okay. You'll come back.
I'm still here though. I'm here.
Yep.
Yeah. We're here.
And kind of the same, I think a good comparison between, I guess, like more conventional art and then filmmaking that we're talking about with the 70s is like medieval art was so imperfect. And that's kind of what I liked about it. It had this realism to it. And I don't know if that was really on purpose. I think some of it was like unskilled, like the less skilled artists. But I think there's beauty in that because it made it more I don't know if realistic's the right word, because the Renaissance artists made the most realistic art in terms of like what a calf muscle looked like, or
Right.
what facial features look like, but realism as in like just like the imperfections of humanity. And I really like, I was so surprised, and I was just wondering if you've been there. And you're back, by the way. I was just wondering if you had been there, because it was just such a pleasant surprise to see this focus on medieval art that you just see so little of in the famous museums of the world, of Europe and the Americas.
Yeah, no, I had not ever been there. I was in New York. I don't know when that place was when it was opened up, when it was founded. I was there a long time ago. My experience in New York was
well before you. This was like the
small.
20s.
No. Okay, well,
yeah,
that would have been before I got there.
I think a lot of people don't really know what it like. I did. I thought it was going to be like a cool monastery that would turn into more of like a walkthrough. It's gorgeous. It looks like you could film Game of Thrones there. Like it's beautiful. It has gardens, and it's up on a hill, and you get a beautiful view of the river. And when you go in, and then it has like the Met banner, so I'm like, oh, this is like legit museum.
Okay, so it's almost like a satellite of the Met.
It's exactly what it is. It's like a satellite of the Met with a focus specifically on medieval art. So everything's like France, 13th century, Spain, 12th century, like really cool. Lots of obviously religious, but also just the way they depicted dragons and camels, and of course like Jesus, and a lot of like really interesting. And some of it was very intricate, especially things out of like more Northern Europe, like the Netherlands. You could see how the Renaissance, everyone does focus on Italy, I think rightfully so, but the Netherlands had a huge part in the Renaissance that I think does get overlooked. You can see like the intricacies there with the Dutch artists. But I don't know. I would highly recommend to anyone listening that has an interest in medieval art. Oh, and it had my favorite, literally I have like this kind of weird obsession with King Arthur. I'm like a huge fan of King Arthur. And when you when you Google him and you go to his Wikipedia page, there's this tapestry of him. It's like the main picture. And I'm looking at this tapestry, and it's called the Heroes Tapestry, and it has some not Israeli, but like Israel Hebrew kings and princes, and some medieval ones. And I'm like, wait, this looks so familiar. And I turn around, and King Arthur's right there. Oh, nice. And I was like, that was very surreal to me to see, because I'd only seen that on the internet, and here it is in New York City this whole time.
Right.
So anyway, highly recommend if you ever come back up here.
Medieval art cracks me up. Like there's a Twitter. I like it, but they're sometimes the expressions are odd.
Very odd. Yes.
There's a Twitter account. I forgot what it's called. I think it was just called Weird Medieval Dudes or something.
Yeah.
And it's paintings, but it's like taken out of context. And it's like there's one looks like it was like a battle scene, and some dude's just getting stabbed, like just getting speared, but he's doing this. Like, okay, I'll die now.
Yeah.
And there's another one where like a friar is exorcising a demon out of a woman, but both of them, like their eyes are half closed. Like it's just such a casual exorcism. Like he's just kind of like, and then the woman's just like. And like there's like a demon flying out of her mouth, but it's just really, everyone was just chill about everything back then, I guess. They're chill about getting killed, chill about getting exercised.
Well, I think there's this whole thing made about like what the monk, because these monks would just be transcribing books, all day. That's all they would do, and they get bored, and they would draw these figures in the margins. And have you ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail? That's like a big part of it, or all these kind of cutaways to these animated shorts or whatever, or all of these like just doodles basically from monks, and a lot of them are like, and there's like social commentary in them. Some of them are pretty crude and crass, and it was almost like cartoonish and ways for monks to express themselves in a very
I'm starting to think of Mad Magazine.
Yeah. I mean, so and I mean, they were all real. Have like people blowing trumpets out with their asshole, and like and so many of them. I was like, why do so many of these pictures of like doodles of like knights fighting snails? Like that's a common theme, is fighting snails. Now it's because snails represented the Lombards, who were this Germanic group who like invaded northern Italy, now called Lombardy, and like they didn't like them, so they would like make these basically like political cartoons back in the 11th century. It was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can almost see Alfred E. Newman getting stabbed,
Just be like, whatever.
Let me worry.
By the way, Judson, before
There is a humor in all those things.
does that look familiar?
Oh no, you got that? Is that the drawing I gave you with the John Brown thing?
Yeah, well, the John Brown's upstairs, so I can't go up there right now. But that
No,
that's
it's fine. But it's a little bit far away. It's a small thing, but I recognize it. It's small, but that's cool. I'm glad you got that one framed too.
Yep,
very
it's
nice.
A Judson original.
That's
I want to show you that I have it up right here.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a pen and ink that I gave you along with the John Brown portrait that I did for you. That's cool, man. That's very cool. I'm glad you got that one fixed up and hung too. That's great.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. How's John Brown doing?
He's good, man. Yeah, he's upstairs. I have a desk upstairs. I really work down here now. But I have a desk and a bunch of like maps and pictures and stuff upstairs too. So he's up there with them.
That's good. Good spot for him.
Yeah.
So Judson, you're in Brazil. How's that been for your creative process? Is it a better place for artists than the US, or at least for you?
Well, for me it is. I would say so.
Yeah.
I'm in a completely different situation than I've ever been in, which can be good. Can be really good. I live in this house with my wife Yasmin, and I moved. I was where you were. I was in LA, and I lived in San Francisco for 6 years before that. LA for 5 years. Lived in New York. Lived in Georgia, which was pretty much spent a lot of my time in Atlanta trying to sort of discover whatever art happenings were there. So I spent a long time in the big city. And so now I'm in the countryside. I mean, big time. I'm in Minas Gerais, which is, it's mostly farmland. I mean, I live in a fairly small town. It's not that there's towns that are smaller, but I'm fairly isolated. So I feel like I've sort of lived a lot of lives in those big cities, which might make you feel older than you are, or burning the candle at both ends in certain ways, and sometimes getting into trouble because of it. So now I feel like I'm in a I don't know if paradise is the right word, but I mean there is a tranquility now, and there's less of a hurry, and I do feel more poetic in a sense, for lack of a better word. I do feel more focused, and I do feel like I don't have to. It's not a grind. I can go at my own pace, and so a lot of things I think have blossomed just from getting away. And when you get away from the city, it's not implicit, but you also do gradually get away from the Twitter and the Instagram.
Right.
You get away from those things. Feel like cities in a sense. If the internet is a landscape, internet and Facebook is like the metropolis. It's where everyone is yelling and no one gives a shit, and everyone's just kind of shouting over each other. So, not that the internet isn't useful, but I mean, there's parts of it that are more of a distraction than anything else. So, I feel good about it, Joe. I really do.
Good.
It's I feel like I just have a lot more time, and there's no one to impress. There's no hipsters here.
How far are you from Rio, Judson?
I'm about 4 hours.
Oh, okay.
From Rio de Janeiro. I have not been to Rio.
Oh.
I've been to Rio de Janeiro is also a state. So I've been to the state. I've been to a place called Parachi, which is down there on the coast. It's on the water. and it's sort of a tourist zone. They have the Flip, it's a literary festival in Paraty,
Cool.
and haven't been to it, but I went down there, and so there's a deeper culture there of basically brought on by tourists, but also the literary festival that draws thousands of people, and there's lots of lectures and Christopher Hitchens, if you know Christopher Hitchens, I think
of course.
He was there and described it as a place that something like if he could build a city for people like him, it would be like Paraty. So
Paraty, how far is that from like Rio, the city?
I would say it's probably equal, so probably 2 hours, maybe 3.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'm asking because I might be coming to Brazil next year. I'm not sure
cool.
yet. It's one of our top choice. It really depends on my fiance's work schedule, and she's in theater, and how much time she would get off depending on the show, and if it's if it's enough time, because that's a pretty far trip. So you don't go for a long weekend. We'd want to go for
no. Yeah.
And she likes the idea of like kind of just having the beach, which we live near the beach. It'd be different to go in the winter. We kind of split time between New York City and where I live in South Jersey. So we'd probably be in like Copacabana or like one of the beach, touristy sections of the city. But I'll let you know if we come down. I know. So 4 hours isn't close. I've heard of Minas. I think Anthony Bourdain did an episode there, so that sounded familiar.
Yeah.
I didn't know how far it was. But I'll obviously let you know if we go down. I just don't know.
Well, even if it'd be great to link up with you, but if we can't, I mean, my wife would certainly send you some sort of thing to guide you around or help guide your decisions or whatever.
Love it. Fantastic.
So
Thanks,
communicate with us. At least you got friends here. If you can make it, if it happens, we'll try and see you or have you over or whatever we can do. But it's
we're gonna and we should talk before. We should talk for 11 months next time. We'll talk to you again. That was surprising. I went back. I was like, when's the last time we had Judson on? And I saw it was like 11 months. Damn.
Yeah.
That did not feel like that long ago, but I guess it was.
Yeah.
I know. It's true.
So you're kind of out in the boonies there. So has that change of scenery, like, has that had much of an impact on your art at all and on your creativity?
Typically it does. I mean, just with any artist, once you change the scenery, there's just little things that just hit differently, and it might be the light, it might be the people, it might be the weather, it could or all those things combined. I've always been primarily an abstract artist. I mean, I've drawn from a particularly American movement, which is abstract expressionism, the abstractionists of the 1940s, the action painters in New York City. That's why I went to New York City. But I was also in sort of my own echo chamber, meaning I thought, and I still catch myself doing this. I mean, I thought everyone was sort of hip to abstract art. Everyone sort of knew what it was and why it was. And the more I go out into places and hear people talk about abstract art, they really don't. And that bothers me. Right. And so there's an essay actually that I'm working on, which is sort of in defense and critical of abstraction. And, the crux of it is something like what is easy to mimic is hard to master. And I don't think we live in an age where people are going to take the time to say, if you hear, people will say something like, oh, it's abstract. Like there's art and then there's abstract.
Right.
Like as if they're two separate things.
Yeah.
And they're not. But the abstraction is so easy to mimic that you do get a lot of kind of half-baked work that people don't know the difference. Everyone is not de Kooning. Everyone doesn't really quite know how to make that image work. But there is this sort of hiding behind, well, it's abstract.
Right.
If you don't like it, it's your problem. You can't get it. It's like, no, I get it. Your paintings just aren't that good.
Yeah.
And I've never had to tell an art. I mean, maybe I would, but I'm not that confrontational to particular people. It's more about ideas. But, so relating it back to America, it's such an American movement. Not to say that abstract art is only found in America, but I've since decided that I don't want to be in that camp. And I think that I've arrived at a place where my artistic concerns as a painter, I've probably been saturated with abstraction. And so I don't want to really do it anymore. I want to paint if I were my version of some sort of surrealistic thing where there's definite images going on and maybe some abstraction, but not pure abstraction. So I think getting away from America has probably allowed me to see the folk art, particularly Portinari, who has plenty of paintings in all over Brazil, but I've seen a bunch of them in the Pinacoteca in Sao Paulo. That's a painter who is sort of like, Brazil's Picasso in a sense. He's a man of the people, maybe more than Picasso was, but he painted what was around him, and he painted the struggle of people, and he was influenced by Picasso, but as everyone basically was, but there's just an opening of a deeper well, or at least a wider well of influences that I think I want to tackle. And if I've already sort of solidified my curiosities about abstract expressionism, and also the visual problem of people just not really understanding it or not having the patience to understand it, I guess it's time to I feel organically like it's time to move on anyway. So I'm doing some different things now, and I have plans, but there's a lot going on. So, but I was painting today, so I'm always painting. So that's
nice.
one thing.
Do you paint every day?
No. Most of the time, I go through seasons. So there's times where I've probably not painted for months, but I always return to it, and that's just sort of a dry spell. But it's usually because I'm doing something else. So I was focusing, on this book of poetry for the past probably 6 months.
Yeah.
I was writing poetry for about the 2 years that I was here, and then it takes time to compile them and edit them and put them in whatever order. So, painting is sort of a lifelong thing. And so I don't feel like I have to do it every day.
Right.
I think, I don't want to turn it into a job. It's not a career. It's something that I will never not do. But so I don't make a point to say I'm going to do this every day. I don't really believe that for myself creatively. Some people need that, Stephen King writes 6 pages of his book every day. That's his thing, and I guess it probably works for him. But so
he tweets 6 pages of a book every day. Motherfucker doesn't shut up. I'm sorry. I've my one of my sayings recently has been fill in the blank with my tolerance. So here, my tolerance for Stephen King has ended. And I really actually cannot stand him anymore. We've talked about on the show how he's one of the only authors I've actually removed books from my book list, like my reading list, just because of personal shit. Like it's the opposite of what we really stand for on the show, like about separating art from artists. But he's so he's kind of had some takes on like censorship and quote unquote disinformation that just to me feels like such a betrayal. that I didn't feel uncomfortable removing him
Are there
from
any other
my list.
Are there any other authors that you've removed where you're like, oh, this My Struggle, this sounds like an interesting book. Whoa, the author. Oh, no, thank you.
Well, it's really not. It's not. I don't do that where it's like, so some people will be like, oh, someone goes viral. It's like, well, let's look up their past, make sure they're not problematic. No, it's not that at all. It's more of like, I have this author's book on my list, and then I start seeing him or her on like Twitter just saying really annoying, ridiculous shit, and my tolerance for that is very high. Like, be like, okay, well, they're annoying, they're saying kind of typical shit, but like that book still sounds really good, it has great reviews, it sounds interesting. There's one other guy, this Vietnamese writer who I guess Vietnamese American, I think, but he won the Pulitzer for a book, and The Sympathizer, I forget his name, it's like Niet Vang Kong or something like that. And he was just like saying really dumb shit during the elections. And I was like, dude, I did like one Google search, and I like pasted it on one of, I like replied to him. It's like your own people being like Vietnamese Americans in Orange County where you live, like don't even agree with what you're saying. Like the statistics show that you're wrong. This is really obnoxious. And I'm like, all right, this book I just put on because it won the Pulitzer anyway. And I took that off. But those are the only
some
two.
of it is the obnoxiousness of it.
Yeah.
I mean, if Stephen King said one thing, that's one thing you could, well, I don't agree with him. But I mean, it's sort of the tweet storms, I guess. You know,
it's not even that so much. It was really it was the disinformation shit. I was like, dude, you have written stuff that like has been attacked, that has tried to be censored. Like he wrote he wrote about like basically a minor, like a bunch of children having a gangbang. Like if you don't know, they don't have this in the movies, but in the book, the girl of the group, all the boys fuck her. And they're like children. And you're gonna talk about like disinformation, like the Disinformation Governance Board, that just to me is such a betrayal of an artist of his caliber and what he stands for, like writing really provocative material that I'm like, okay, dude, you're just like sold out to the establishment. Like you've made it so you can say this shit. Like you're kind of grandfathered in, where if you were writing this now, like you wouldn't have these takes because your books would be the ones getting censured and censored, both.
It's the activism thing that bothers the hell out of me, where like you said, Judson, you know, like it's one thing if a prominent, you know, a pop cultural figure spouts some dumb opinion sometimes, okay, whatever, I say dumb shit too, but it's like, okay, now you've kind of appointed yourself as like the arbiter of this thing, simply because you've sold a lot of books, or because you sold a lot of, you know, because your movie was a hit last year or something like that. It's like, no, I don't. It's the act, and also like whenever I go to like an art museum or gallery here, and like I'm looking at the bio of the artist, and it says like so and so is an artist and activist, and it's like, okay, right off the bat, it's such a turn off.
Didn't I tell you that, Joe?
I know.
What is that, LA artist?
Yeah, it's definitely an LA thing for sure. And I'm
you don't have to hear it from me, but I've been on that thing for a while, and so I know how annoying that is, and LA is probably, you know, the capital of it. You know, Hollywood and fine art. I mean, all those, a lot of those artists take their cues in a way from Hollywood. Whether they know it or not. I mean, it sort of just bleeds into the culture and into the air. It's not something that they would necessarily admit or be cognizant of, but it's still sort of there in the air.
Absolutely, and there have definitely been shows that I've been to where, you know, someone was had become an established figure in one medium. They're like, oh, you know, like I'm actually gonna be a painter now, and it comes off as so self-serving. Like there was one, it was like a hip hop producer, he's like a Grammy award-winning hip hop producer, but he had like an art show dedicated to his work, and it was just really bad. But it was just sort of like, yeah, you started painting like a year ago, but you've been in the music industry for 10 years. But it's just sort of, I don't know, it just seems so like, oh, people like me, so I guess I can do anything and put my name on it, and people will still like me, sort of thing.
It's almost kind of like merchandising.
Yeah, exactly.
In a sense. I remember, I mean, there were people that you would go to these shows, and I mean, this happened more than once, but it was like, and then my next show, I'm taking classes for sculpture. It's like I'm taking classes for sculpture, and my next show for sculpture has already been scheduled, and I hope I know what I'm doing with the clay. I hope it stays together. It's like, well, maybe you shouldn't be doing a show if you don't know how to work clay or whatever. I mean, it's like, it was literally like, gee, I hope this doesn't fall apart on us. It's like, how experimental should this be?
Right.
It was in LA. I mean, it was just constantly just being sort of, I shouldn't take it too personally, but it's just some things just sort of slap you in the face with how bad they are and how stupid they are. People are just that was great. That was good. And it's like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it always cracks me up that like I wish that people that audiences were a little more like, you don't have to be a dick, but they were a little more honest. It's like, are you applauding this person simply because their painting is on a wall? Is that enough for you to be like, oh, this is nice, this is profound? It's like, no, it's not. It's they made it on a computer, and it's just they just kind of slapped together.
They got it
AI.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of waiting in line, and the quickest way to jump the line is to be a fan.
Yeah.
So you always want to appear to be supportive, and that turns into a type of circle jerk where you can't criticize anyone for anything.
Yeah.
And that leads to, what would you say? Well, a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Because if the work doesn't matter, then what does? It's not the work, it's the network, it's the networking.
Yeah.
And so, it's by far not the only industry where that is the standard, but it's certainly more saturated with that type of idea than many other things are.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing that bothers me, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is like when there'll be like a description next to the piece that's on display, and it'll like just straight up say like what the piece is about. Like it'll be like, oh, this painting of rainbow is symbolic of the struggle against oppressive blah blah blah, and it's like, I mean, first off, like probably not. And you probably use a bunch of big words from academia to slap in there, but also it's just sort of like you're removing, you're taking away my chance to interact with the work and struggle with it and kind of come to it with my own experiences and come to my own conclusions about what it's about.
Yeah. So I mean, that sort of thing in the arena that you're talking about is another chance, I would imagine, for a lot of people to use some sort of lingo that is of the DEI, origin story. Maybe there's some group you're part of that was oppressed, marginalized. Those things can be part of a woke thing, depending on how they're worded. But what it essentially comes from, in my estimation, is probably the academic world. And so when you go to an art show, and what you're referring to is sort of when an art show sort of feels like homework. It feels like this is a project, and here's what it is, and here's what it means, and this is what I was doing. And there's a lot of that. And that is like you're saying, it's a little bit of a spoon feeding. And
it's more like a book report rather than
exactly. It's very book reporty, very homeworky. It has an academic sting to it. And a lot of these artists have gone to art school, and they've lived in situations where that is mostly the going rate. And so they've developed in that time period over years, where art students become art teachers, and they teach students who become art teachers. You do that for a few generations, and you have your own cyclical type of language.
Right.
And it spins out anyone who wasn't there. So no wonder if you just ask a normal person walking down the street, what do they think of art? They think it's something that clever people do in New York.
Yeah.
Or LA, they don't. There's a big butting of the heads between the working man or woman, the blue collar, and the artist, and there shouldn't be. But it's not the working people's fault. It's not the blue collar's fault. It's the artists who have become pretentious. They've spoken above people's heads. They charge too much for their work. They don't go to places that don't have a Starbucks on every corner. I mean, it's become a very self-serving, very interior type of culture. And so, to your other question, I'm out of that now. And so I can see those things, and I saw them then, but I can see them in greater relief even now. So, I think, a lot of that is the fault of the academics and the fault of a type of language that purposefully tries to talk to one another instead of, anyone else that might be on the outside of that loop.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of like what's happened to journalism too, because I mean, like a few decades ago, like the journalism was considered like a pretty blue collar job. It's like you had to go out and travel and meet people, and you had these tight deadlines, and then you had all this stuff. But nowadays, like the vast majority of journalists, they went to prestigious universities, and they didn't work at the local newspaper or anything like that. They it's like right out of, as soon as they graduated from Harvard or Yale, they immediately went to working at the Washington Post or the New York Times. And so now it's like most journalists just typing or in their underwear, from their condos sort of thing. And now, so I think it's kind of a similar thing where it used to be more of the people and more to inform the public. But now it's like, well, now we have to talk above the public. Now we have to tell you what to believe and what to think.
Or and also, maybe journalists that center themselves too much. And so there's a notoriety that they're trying to ascertain, and it doesn't feel like it's for you. It feels like, someone is, I don't know, maybe a little bit too egotistical for their own literature.
Right.
Well, I don't think, journalism, I think, has suffered the most from this because they're like an artist, at least if they have, like, a lot of great art has come out of like provoking for whatever it is, for activism, let's say, or for a certain movement or something like that, where journalism like is not supposed to do that. Like it's supposed to present arguments and objective facts, most importantly, because that's how you get anything, and speaking truth to power. And that's completely changed, especially with the kind of journalists that Joe is talking about, which is completely accurate. I mean, I remember when like Taylor Lorenz went and she like knocked on some door in Brooklyn, and there were like shoe leather journalism going on. It's like that is one thing about Vice I miss. Like at least Vice used to like do that. Yeah, they used to actually like talk to the terrorists or to the people at the site, whatever it was. Like you were getting primary sources, and not just from the towers in Washington D.C. or L.A. or New York or whatever it was. But yeah, so journalism definitely has suffered most from this, and that's what's going on right now at the Times. Like, I think there is a pushback, which is good, and that's why I don't know if you've. I listen to a podcast that talks a lot about that's very like insider kind of journalism, a lot of focus on like the gender stuff and internet bullshit and that sort of thing. Like that is what's going on right now at the New York Times, where like the younger generation, there is this push for like to be not like to be openly activist journalists, like I wouldn't even say a multi-hyphenate, because that's what I think we've been talking about this whole time. It's like that's the new terms, like multi-hyphenate. Some people use it as a derogatory term, like myself, and other people kind of lean into it. But that's but so it's not even that. It's more of just like, no, journalism by definition should be activism, like should be an activist profession, which is very like deeply disturbing, and should be, I think, to anyone.
Yeah, the question is, an activist for what?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it sucks.
I mean, an activist for the truth would be the only real answer you could probably give if you're talking about activating anything.
And that should just be like innate in journalism itself, just like getting to the truth, or like, and truth isn't always a single thing. Like there are, I don't know if this is right, like subjective truths. Like I don't know if that's an oxymoron, but like different people can look at a situation and deduce their own conclusion from it. Like they can do that. There's different like that's totally, I think, accurate and fine, but it's more of presenting those, backing it up with data and witnesses and as much objective information as possible to form accurate conclusions, like to do that and to understand people why they came to this conclusion. There's supposed to be this kind of like journalistic autopsy after the 2016 election, which lasted for all of about 30 seconds, when they were like, well, we didn't talk to the people out there. We were we were stuck in our blue bubbles and we didn't know how this would happen. The thing happening, of course, Trump being elected. And then immediately it was like, well, he's a Nazi. So it doesn't matter. And, they're all evil no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter that maybe all their industry was removed and that they're called deplorable and that their very existence is considered like an act of aggression. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. And that they could vote reactionary, even if it's quote unquote against their best interest, their own interest, which a term I fucking hate. And it's like the most like obnoxious thing that they say, because these same people vote against their own interest all the time. Like, but of course, when they do it, it's for a righteous purpose. And when someone else does it, people can have different, but like they might value something like their children's education or their free speech or their freedom of religion over maybe a tax benefit they might get. Like, I don't know, like different people vote for different reasons and have their, the abortion side of the let's say the pro-life side of the Republican base has been voting on that sole issue since the 70s, basically.
Yeah,
that doesn't matter.
Issue voter is a real thing, and
to them that is in their best interest. Like, and they form that, like they decided that's in their best interest. So anyway, so I have a point here I want to get to, which is, and I wanted to ask, I wrote this question down for you, Judson. I don't remember if we talked about this last time, but like you in the beginning of this episode, you brought up how you basically, I guess, went to like a retreat in northern Georgia. Would you call it that, like an artist retreat? When you had your own cabin?
Yeah.
A residency, a residency, right. And I read both your two most recent pieces on the TRM Medium page, how you spend time with artists, and it sounded like you don't really keep in touch with many of them or have many friends. And I'm just wondering, like, do you like being around other artists? Do you like do you have artist friends? And I've said this on the show before, like I don't really like being around other writers. Like, I know both of you are writers, but like in my experience, writers, and I altered this a little, that when I say writers are the worst people, I think journalists are the worst people, but writers are second. Politicians are in there, are close, or probably a close third. But I was wondering, like, did you feel like an outcast and alienated, or did you just not really keep in touch for other reasons?
Well, back as far as New York, I mean, some of those people aren't really artists anymore. We could have kept in touch as friends, but you lose touch with people. I consider them friends from afar, and if one of them showed up at my house and it was raining outside and they had nowhere to go, I'd greet them as a friend. There's no animosity. I do like artists. I just meet very few of them. Mm-hmm. I don't particularly like people that are busy.
Okay.
I've lived in the big city for so long, and I hate this sort of thing where it's just like, it's been crazy. Shut up. It's like, what was so crazy? What'd you do? I had to go shopping, what'd you get? Oh, I got a new hat, and it's like, it's not busy. I like people that can sit around for hours and have dinner. Yeah. and really talk. That's why I like talking to you guys, I guess. I mean, you guys are pretty good.
Thanks.
All right.
I do like artists, but I mostly like people.
Mm.
I spent a long time bartending. And when you bartend, you meet a lot of people, and they're in their comfort zone, and you're comfortable because you work there, and you're a bartender, and they're comfortable because they've had a few glasses of whatever. And so I've never given up my love for people. I really do love people, but the way the art world is, I find there's that busyness, that sort of, especially in LA, I have to bring it up again, but everyone is clawing to get somewhere and to do something, and so no one has the time to sit around and let's just drink a bottle of wine, smoke a joint, pass the guitar or whatever, the bong, I don't care. It doesn't matter. But I like people who have time and I can spin with them and look them in the eyes. And so, my best friend from those New York days is a guy named Mark DeRuza, and he's a great friend of mine. And he's now a chef. So, is he an artist? Well, I get maybe. He's a craft-based guy who's in love with what he does. That's good enough for me. And we've been friends ever since, and we talk all the time. So, I'm 36, so I expect there to be less people around. I expect there to be less artists. I mean, artists do drop off. There's a lot of writers who used to be writers and non-writers who used to be writers, and people who said, I used to paint when I was in my 20s, but now I work at the bank or whatever. Not everyone's going to last in the hardcore lifestyle because you get older and you need different things. And so people drop off. But I don't particularly feel the need to have a lot of artists around. I think just having good people that are open and jovial and can eat dinner and drink wine, I guess,
You're kind of skeptical of people who are or artists who are like working on too many things at once.
Am I?
Yeah.
No, I mean I'm like that. I like to work in a frenzy. I like to have too much. I like to make a list of the things that I need to do for each project, and I don't get them done that day. It affects my work in that everything takes more time. But if I have a writer's block, I can paint. If I have painter's block, I can write, and so on and so forth. So I don't expect everyone to be like me. I'm sort of practiced in that type of expression. So it sort of works for me. I'm sort of a kid in a candy store. I just want to go over here and do this for a minute and over here and do this for a minute. And I don't want there to be too much stress on any one thing, which doesn't prevent it from happening. But typically I like to just walk around the room and a few strokes here and a couple of lines on the keyboard here. And I don't know. I just feel like a happy kid that can just run around and play with all these different types of toys.
So I'm actually kind of starting on an article about like sort of kind of a brutal lesson in a way of
a what? I'm sorry?
A brutal lesson about trying to make it in LA as a creative person. Everybody here is a flake. Like everybody's a fucking flake, and like there's a reason why the Hollywood promise exists. And at first, for the first couple of years that I was here, I would sometimes take it kind of personally, where it's like, I met someone like at a party or at a bar and we got along and like, oh, hey, you're into this, we should work together on something. Like, okay, cool. Yeah. Let's exchange numbers. And like a week later, hey man, you want to get together, talk about that thing? And then like, oh yeah, sorry, I'm really busy right now, but I'll let you know. And then like, I never hear back. Like that's happened to me so many fucking times. And it happens to almost everybody else that I know too, where it's like, oh,
shopping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for a while I was taking it kind of like, man, like what the fuck's up with this talent? But I'm also kind of like, Yeah, but everybody's working on 10 different projects, and you never know when one of those projects is going to take off. So they might say, yeah, let's work together on something, but then 2 days later, one of those other projects takes precedence. So it's kind of like, I might do the same thing if I'm working on something and it takes off, and it's like, oh, sorry, I got to say no to all these other things. So, but
yeah,
I mean, that's just kind of how it is, I guess, in a big city.
it is. But LA perfected it and practically invented it.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, people were talking about LA like that in the 1930s.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all the writers would talk about how, you go to LA, you write your thing, you get your money, and you leave.
Yeah.
It's not a great place.
Yeah,
I had a lot of those same experiences, and unfortunately, most of my negative personal interactions with people, unfortunately, they did stem back to a type of flakiness or a type of narcissism.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but for certain people, I presented myself not on purpose, but as someone who could do something for them.
Yeah.
I'm not a person that makes promises. I don't pretend I'm a producer. I don't pretend I know people that I don't. I don't have any money,
Yeah.
But for some reason they thought, well, maybe we could meet up and have coffee.
Right.
And I would do that. And then as soon as they realized I was just in the dirt like they were, it's like, ooh, look at the time. It's like, oh, I thought you wanted to hang out. Sorry. There's a lot of that. And that's sort of what I mean about people being busy. And it's sort of what I, like you said, it's also anywhere where there's a lot of people. Everyone is just looking for, who can get them to the next rung up the ladder.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel about that? I mean, you're writing scripts. You're in a band. You're still working with on the music, the blues thing, right?
Yeah. We're supposed to be recording soon. But I mean, the main band leader, his wife is pregnant and she's due very soon, so that's taking up a lot of his time. So
really priorities. What the fuck, man?
Yeah, no, that's a legit one. Okay.
Yeah. That's
okay,
but yeah, it's definitely, like I said, it was something that I'm coming to terms with much easier now, where I'm kind of like, okay, don't take it personally. Like, that person probably wanted to work with you, but something came up. Or there are a few other things too that are actually kind of funny. It's like, I would talk to somebody like, hey, yeah, let's work together, let's collaborate on something. And then 2 months later, hey, so you want to get together? It's like, oh, I moved. Okay. It's best just kind of like, okay, whatever, that project didn't work out, but good thing, like all other people in LA, I've got 10 other projects that I'm working on, so maybe one of those other things will take off. So
yeah.
And I think it's also like a good opportunity too for me to kind of be like, well, there were times when I flaked out, and I don't want to be the kind of person that annoys me. So it's like, okay, maybe this is just as an opportunity to hopefully try to establish myself as someone who's reliable and actually follows through on things. So
yeah. Well, in a busy place where everyone's hungry, it's also not a good idea to tell people no.
Yeah.
Because there goes the opportunity. You want to work together? No, I don't. It's better to just say yes, and then if you don't later, then fuck it.
Yeah.
I mean?
Exactly.
It's sort of like the default way of, yeah, of course, whatever this is. I don't know, but we'll see. It's just sort of, you don't close doors, you leave them open until it sort of closes itself, in a sense.
Exactly.
Socially. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a strategy there, I think, with some people, whether they would phrase it like that or not. But
yeah. What about you, Ben? What kind of artists do you not like? Kind of.
Man, I don't know. I have such a romantic, I have such romantic thoughts of just finding that literary bar and hanging out with people who know, artists, painters, writers, whatever it is, sculptors, and it's talking art. And then I realized that I don't know, I fucking shoot myself. I hate these people drive me nuts. And I've been Judson, you're talking about the narcissism. I've been around writers like that, and I'm like, dude, you wrote a fucking children's book, like chill. Like, and I say that as someone who I have an idea for, I have a couple ideas for children's books, but like the way that I think the self-satisfaction a lot of people get out of it is just such a turn off to me, and I've kind of embraced more of just being like, I don't know if an outsider is the right term, but just kind of building my own readership and writing exactly what I want to write, because I'm an independent writer, so I don't have to change anything. Like, my editors give suggestions, they give, whether that's plot, voice, obviously grammar, things like that, they do. But
Right.
if I want a certain message, if I want certain characters or what they say or whatever, like I pick that. Like I can write exactly what I want. And that's much more of what I'm into. And a lot of people like it, some don't. Like I had my first like scathing review recently, and it kind of hurt, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie, the bitch kind of, and then I'm like, oh, she just found. And this wasn't even my most recent book. This was my most popular book, like really the book that sells semi-regularly, as the most reviews, and like a lot of everyone who reads it for the most part either likes it or loves it. But this person fucking hated it. And
Nice.
I realize it's like,
Let's get them on the show.
It's like, I would love to, and just be like, she actually, this is a good thing that I should have brought up earlier, because when you were saying like, well, they wrote this character, like she was mad that basically this is the book, I Have a Better Greek God and a girl, like those are the two point of views, right? It's the Greek god Dionysus and then this girl New Orleans, and it switches between them. And some people are really shitty to the girl, and I think because I wrote that a lot of male characters are shitty to this girl, that I like hate women. Like because like I had some really vile male characters in this book, and it's like, and the girl was like a girl of color, as you would say now, and it's like, where are you getting this from that I condone this behavior? Like, I'm gonna write it because these kind of people exist. It was interesting, it moved the plot, and gave the story different, it gave different parts of the story, but that doesn't mean I like condone it or I want it to happen. And she took every single thing like that, every kind of like crit identitarian point, like if someone was gay or someone was black or some like whatever it was, and just interpreted it in the least favorable way.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, like this book isn't for you. Like you're on a mission to find problems with everything. You're not on a mission to enjoy fiction.
Right.
No, flattening everything to the nearest evil is always is a clear sign of that type of motivation, where they don't even give you an inch. You know what I mean? I mean, what if it wasn't fiction? I mean, these things do happen.
Yeah.
I don't know specifically, but I mean, whatever you wrote could have happened. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
So I mean, it probably did on some level. So yeah, to talk about something isn't a celebration or giving permission for it to happen again or justifying it. And people get that confused all the time. All the time. So I hear you about the bad reviews. They do sting.
This was, I was like, you fucking bitch. Like, I didn't write anything, but I'm like, oh, I know what you're doing. Like, you're just looking to like, that made her feel good to write that about my work, and it didn't feel like a good faith critique. Like, I think that there are plenty of good faith critiques you can make about any of my work. Like, that's totally fine. But this,
of course, easily
it bothers it bothers like it bothers me because it just did not feel like it was in good faith, and it was just like maybe they listen to the podcast and they're like, fuck this guy. That's no, but she actually read, like, at least she actually read the book. Like, I could tell she read it, which is great.
Thank you.
I hope she bought it. Yeah. And she cared enough to write a fucking review about it, but still, it's like, Jesus, lady. Like,
sometimes like I get negative comments on my Medium articles, and I've gotten to the point where I just
those
stopped.
are just me. That's just,
Oh,
that's just me on my burners.
I've gotten to the point now where I just I don't respond at all, because when I start going back and forth, it takes a huge chunk of my time. But like even when they make a negative comment that stings, I'm still like, yeah, but I get some of your money because you read my articles on Medium, so I don't care anymore. You're interacting, like the more you interact with my articles, the
Yeah.
more money of yours I get. So go have
Yeah,
at it.
it's
Say what
not-
you want.
It's not about your approval either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have a book on Amazon, and someone wrote pure garbage.
Was that it? Just 2 lines? Just or those 2 words?
Yeah, that was it. It said pure. It was a redundancy of some sort. It was like total pure garbage.
Oh.
It's like, well, it's my garbage. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
but there's a
My
purity to it, though.
garbage.
At least it's pure. It's
yeah, at least it's pure. Okay. So,
have you faced much criticism like back during your US days as an artist? Like did anybody like saw any of your work and tell you to your face that your art sucks in any way? Have you ever had to deal with that?
No, I got people who didn't seem to like me. I think we talked about this a little bit, but I don't come across as your Whole Foods, LA artist
Hipster type,
liberal.
yeah.
I don't have to even say anything. I can just walk into the room.
Yeah.
I sort of saunter, and I wear leather jackets and boots, and I don't know. I feel like they could always see me coming. And so I had studio visits, and I had, unfortunately, mostly like white women who were like around my age, just sort of, they just didn't like whatever if I stunk, they didn't like the stench. I don't know.
Yeah.
No one really took the time to necessarily critique my art, but my art wasn't seen very much. I mean, I didn't have any shows. I had a few open studios, but those were mostly people that I knew, and most of the people that showed up in for my open studio were people who I bartended for. The bar that I worked for cleared out for 2 hours, and they all came to my studio, and they were my friends, and they don't know anything about art. They probably thought I was nuts.
Oh.
But they were there to have they were there to have fun.
Yeah.
And so I never got to the point of a critical review, although I did have a guy who was sort of a trendsetter in the art world at the time. And he was a very popular guy, and I'd gotten to know him, and he was nice enough, but I think he knew the game he was playing a little bit, but he sort of came over to my studio and critiqued my art, and he said, Judson, I mean, some of this stuff is good. It's great. I mean, I feel like it doesn't belong in a gallery. I feel like it, I could see it in a museum. I'm like, oh, that's supposed to be a critique?
Yeah.
I mean, he meant it as a kind of, my art does have an agedness to it. It does. When you look at it, it looks old in a sense. I mean, that's the generation that I pull from. I'm not a contemporary. My art doesn't look contemporary. It looks modern.
Right.
I've always been a modern painter, not a contemporary painter.
Right.
But that was sort of a line that stuck with me. But other than that, most of all, people just sort of didn't really like me that much.
Yeah.
So
cool.
I will say, like, as much as frustrated as I can get on like book sales, with the lack thereof sometimes, and like why haven't I sold a book in a month or something like that, or like not getting enough views on things or whatever it is, like when you get when either like a friend or a stranger, whichever it is, I think it's a different kind of sensation, like does say they enjoyed your art for lack of a better term, for me, my books or maybe an article I wrote or something, like I think that does make it all worth it. Like Pat, who, Pat, he's a comedian who lives in LA. I grew up with him. He's from New Jersey, but he lives in LA, so actually knows Joe both of us. And he's been on 3 episodes. He has told me like my first book is his favorite book, which is like one of the coolest things that someone has said to me. Or even Joe, yesterday I get an email for that piece I wrote in TRM about rereading my favorite book, right? The Drifters by Mishner. Some random guy just emailed me on my website saying, I had to reach out. I've read that, The Drifters 6 or 7 times. He was actually bringing a full circle. He was like a journalist in Vietnam doing like real journalism shit. And he's like, and every time I read that, I can like look back differently, and I have a different association with it. And I know that you kind of came to this conclusion that you're not going to reread it, but I really hope you do. And then Judson, what you were just saying, he actually said, if you're ever in the Lehigh Valley, which is a part of Pennsylvania, we should meet up and discuss this book. Like we should grab coffee and discuss this book. So it's kind of like what you were just saying about like meeting with people and kind of just taking the time. And I thought that was very cool. And that was something I wrote last year. Yeah. Right. And just have someone randomly, some guy I've never met before, just reach out to me. Like that is really cool. Like just it's that whether you write something on Medium or you write a novel, that I've had readers in South Africa, in Japan, in Brazil, in in Sweden, and for them to reach out to me, it's a very cool feeling that does negate all of the shitty feelings that come with putting your art out there, and when you don't getting the attention that you might think it deserves.
For sure. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's kind of if your art, whatever it may be, can extend to that level, I think it's definitely obviously a compliment to the work, at least, maybe to you, but more towards the work particularly.
Sure. Yeah.
And the toughest thing is probably being ignored. I'd rather have 10 comments on something that say you suck than just sort of
I don't know, man.
I mean, you, especially on the internet, you do have to build up, a tolerance.
Yeah.
And with enough negative comments that you read, like you were saying before, you can sort of sense the motivation. There are some people who are just out to get you. Yeah. And they stab you and they twist the knife. Yeah. If there's not some compliment embedded into something somewhere, and it's not that someone has to give you a compliment to give you a critique. Right. But if they're just bashing you over the head, like their comment is a rock and they're trying to take you out, it feels like you struck a nerve and you don't know where that nerve was. Maybe you do, but you don't know. This isn't coming from, like you said, a good faith place. They're trying to hurt you. And once you sense that someone is trying to hurt you, it really comes off as cheap and something that, at least for myself, I'm likely to ignore. Yeah. Because I think, you're just making it too personal. It's this means too much to you, and you're a random person. So you can't let it ruin your day or ruin the project or whatever it is. I know you know that, but just to reemphasize that people come from all sorts of perspectives, and once you sense that it's a bad faith thing, you can kind of stop reading, really.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's also, Ben, you're talking about how like that one email kind of made meant so much to you. It's like, I like that, because like making something creative, like there's automatically this assumption that like, oh, so are you professional? Or so it's just sort of like success is measured in terms of how many followers do you have, how much money are you making? But so little gets talked about, like, well, has your work touched people? Like, has it affected people? Has it made people think about life in different ways? Like that I think is ultimately more worthwhile. But that's also the kind of reward that doesn't come instantly for a lot of people. It's much easier to be like, yeah, okay, I wrote this article, okay, now I want my paycheck, or I wrote this book, okay, when do I get my advance check? But being able to pour your heart into something and then have other people to go, hey, yeah, that you articulated something that I was, struggling with, or that I was going through, or you motivated me to do this thing. Yeah, that's actually a lot better in many ways than getting a, check.
Think
But
so,
I mean, it'd still be
Ben?
nice to have a check, though. I'm saying.
Checks are nice.
Yeah, checks.
Both is better,
No.
but obviously we see what you mean.
No,
I mean, maybe success will come. If it does, it could very well come late.
Yeah.
If it doesn't come at all in that commercial way, those little nuggets of where you've made someone think or feel certainly is part of the stew.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm. Well, Judson, so you got any other projects lined up, man? Like, you got anything interesting in the pipeline?
Well, I just put out that book of poetry.
Yeah.
Like a bird knows to sing.
We'll be sure to add that in the description for this episode, so people can
Sure.
go check it out.
I don't know. I wrote all those poems in miniature ice, and I think there's sort of a calm and a focus to them that I think almost all of them rhyme, which I haven't done necessarily.
No.
Didn't do it on purpose.
Right.
But if you're familiar with the rhyming poetry of people like W.B. Yeats and Keats, and even some of E. Cummings stuff, there's a simplicity and form there that I think kind of informed some of these works. So I've been very busy on that. I'm fairly deep into not an autobiography, but a biography of my father, who died in 2017. He lived a very kind of rambunctious boom bust type of life, and I have a lot of work into that already, but it's mostly from my own perspective. But he lived such a long life before I was around that now I'm going back and talking to ex-wives of his and other children. There's a brother that I still haven't met of mine that's a half brother.
Wow.
But we've chatted. So I have another brother named John Cork. There's William Stacy. Those are two brothers that I never knew growing up. I've since met John Cork and have yet to meet Stacy. So there's like a lot to unpack. He was a very mysterious guy. I mean, I say in the book at one point, I was probably 10 or 11 years old before it dawned on me that everyone technically has two sets of grandparents.
No.
I mean, grandma and grandpa were always my mother's, the maternal grandparents. I never thought about my dad's grandparents because he never mentioned them. So I wasn't trained to think about that. And so there's a big mystery to my father. My father was a surgeon. He was a doctor. He was also a pilot. He was type rated on a lot of different airline, a lot of different equipment. A very passionate, artistic guy. I'm a lot like him. I was probably the closest person to him. And so that's a long-term project. And then I'm making a film with my wife. It's just me and her.
Yeah.
I'm the only actor. I'm playing all the roles. It sounds very strange, and I sort of purposefully undersell it. I'm gonna undersell it. We're shooting it on a phone.
Cool.
She is someone who is pretty knowledgeable about film, probably more than me on many levels. I've acted before. I was in a film in San Francisco called Vacation, which my friend who was a director asked me to act in, and I said, yeah, sure. I had no real reason to to act. I had no hunger for it or anything like that. But he said, I think you'll be good in this role. And so then I find out I'm in every scene. I'm the main character. I'm almost in every shot. But we worked through it, and it was fairly decent production. But it was a short film, and I learned a little bit about cinematography and directing. But this film is going to be something big for me and my wife and collaborator. I hope it's a feature-length film.
Sweet.
We're really showcasing Minas Gerais and the Brazilian landscape. I play a few different characters. That's sort of part of the story inside the story.
Yeah. And
we've shot one character, a character based on a painter. And that's shot, and I've edited it, and it's tight, and it's ready to go, but it's only part of a much larger vignette of these other characters I'm doing. The reason that I have a beard and this long hair is actually I'm playing a character who is sort of a vagrant like I was when I lived in my car in LA. So I don't do this because it makes me beautiful. I haven't shaved on purpose because we're finishing up the role of this character in the next couple of weeks. So that's been a thing that we've been working quite hard on, and my wife is producing it to some level, even though it's not a traditional set film. So that's the closest word I have for her role. But I'm directing it, and there's not really a script per se. And so that's something that I'm definitely going to talk to you guys more about. You get long-winded and you start talking about something you're writing, and it's like I don't want to give away too much, or I don't mean to sound pretentious, but I lose steam talking about it rather than doing it. But that's why I've got the beard, and we're working towards. I'd say we're probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years out. We're already a year deep. But age and different forms of the body, like growing my hair out and stuff, are part of the reason why it takes so long, because the characters demand that type of movement. So that's why it's going to take a long time.
Gotcha.
And then I've got a new body of paintings that are studies right now, but that's something I'm going to get into. So like I said, I'm a kid in a toy store. I'm just moving around as much as I can.
That's awesome, man. Looking forward to what you put out, man. And we'd love to have you back on to talk more about what you've been working on and what's
for
going on in your life.
I mean, that's I definitely want to talk to you guys again. Like when you guys talk about film, it's so interesting. You guys are so knowledgeable, and I really would like to be able to get you guys' opinion, particularly on this film. I just, you understand, it'll take time to get there.
Yeah.
But I guess we're wrapping up here, huh?
Yeah, I mean, unless is there anything else that you guys are going to talk about, or should we?
Well, Joe, when are you gonna write this script and film this movie that I will star in, and just kind of nonchalantly be the star, like Judson got to do in San Francisco? Because I'm waiting for his Big Ben to come out and star in this movie. I'm like, fine, Joe, I'll do it.
Yeah,
my friend.
Give me your number and I'll call you back. I'll let you know when I'm free.
You guys are great. Let's not make it 11 months this time.
Yeah, man.
I think we were chatting so much, and there's definitely things that get lost in the chatter. But I definitely want to keep in touch with you guys. I'm going to submit more. I want to submit something regularly to the TRM on Medium, but I don't want to crowd the page or whatever. So maybe we can think of a schedule like once or whatever. But
Yeah, sure, man. Whenever it's fine because I'm writing a lot. So if anything, like I'm the one who's kind of crowding the page right now. But yeah, I mean, if anything, I would love to get more regular writers on there to help space
Yeah,
that out.
don't.
Okay.
I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like we, I think it's better for the publication to constantly have new
content. Yeah.
Okay,
work out
sure.
there. Yeah.
You know, I just don't want to throw everything up, but yeah. So I'm sort of back on Medium, and
Cool.
so I think the Reckless Muse is like sort of my home away from home. If I'm not going to publish something myself, I think a lot of it should be towards you guys because it seems to fit what I write about anyway.
Yeah, no,
Well,
absolutely,
well,
man. We'd love to promote more of your stuff, and yeah, let's definitely get together sooner than 11 months. And hopefully, get
Same for like the
together.
summer or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Whatever you guys want. Whatever you guys want, I can always find the time. I'm not that busy.
All right,
good,
man. Well, thanks for coming
All
on the
right,
show.
thank you for having me, guys. Thank you, Joe. Ben, let me know if you're coming to Brazil.
Oh, I will, Judson. Definitely.
All right, you
We'll
guys
talk
have a
before
good
that.
night.
All
You
right.
too. Stay reckless.
Stay reckless,
All right,
everybody.
cheers.
Stay reckless.